They urged Saint-Domingue's whites to accept the rebels' offer, and they called slave leaders to the capital of Le Cap for negotiations. Trust was minimal. Some slave rebels wanted to kill their white prisoners, but Toussaint Louverture argued against it. He wanted the whites returned to Le Cap as a gesture of goodwill.
So Toussaint is sent to negotiate with the planters with the idea that, in a sense, a settlement can be reached. The settlement is not only for the freedom of some of the insurgent leaders, but also for some reforms on the plantation. Small reforms, but reforms that, at least in the letters they describe, their followers really want.
Whether the small group of leaders actually would have had the power to say to all of these people that they'd taken out, okay, you're going back to work now, here's your chains. I don't know. As it happened, the white people were so short-sighted that they didn't even give them the opportunity to try.
The whites said no. They said no. Because at that time, they were the one who wanted revenge. They forget about what they have done for 3 centuries, and they think that they were the victims in that thing. So they have to avenge themselves. So they're not going to forgive or forget anything. They refused.
Of course, he's taken up arms against them. But at the same time, he's made a lot of concessions, and he's struggled against his own followers to say, look, we're going to treat the prisoners well, we're going to trade with them, we're willing to make a deal. And to have that refused by the planter class, I think certainly must have had a radicalizing effect.
Toussaint's support for a settlement abruptly ended, and with it, the best deal the whites would ever see. Back in France, the Democratic Revolution had turned to terror. France's Revolutionary Army was at war with neighboring countries. Its radical leaders sought to purge themselves of enemies from within. They executed thousands. In an early 1793, they did the unthinkable. The revolutionary government beheaded the king.
Events in France were moving faster than anyone had ever intended. I mean, this was volcanic upheaval, a true class revolution that turned everything completely upside down. And each ripple that came out would strike the shores of Saint-Domingue.
One of the biggest ripples from France that washed into Saint-Domingue's shores was a commissioner named Léger Félicité Sonthonax. He was a French revolutionary with radical ideas about life in the colony.
Sonthonax arrives in Saint-Domingue having already had bad words said about him. There are people who've actually written from France to the colonists in Saint-Domingue saying, watch out for this guy. He's an abolitionist. He wants to abolish slavery.
Saint-Domingue's mixed-race population had so far retained its fragile alignment with the whites. To ensure that continued, Sonthonax created a representational council on the island and invited mixed-race citizens to serve. He even brought mixed-race men into the colonial government.
And a lot of white planters are really, really upset about that and see him as a really destructive force.
The white planters had cause for worry. Less than 2 years after joining the rebellion, Toussaint Louverture had risen to the top of the rebel army.
I am Toussaint Louverture. My name is perhaps known to you.
In 1793, he wrote an open letter to the island's disenfranchised.
I have undertaken vengeance. I want liberty and equality to reign in Saint-Domingue. I work to bring them into existence. Unite yourselves to us, brothers, and fight with us for the same cause,
With his letter, he announces two things. He announces, first of all, his commitment to the process, to the project of emancipation. And he announces his presence as a leader, maybe even the leader. He has gained great respect from his followers. And with this proclamation, he's essentially saying, you want freedom, and I'm the one who's going to bring you that freedom. So I'm the person to follow in this regard.
But Toussaint at this time was addressing the wider world too. He was particularly focused on Spain.
The Spanish wanted to wrestle the colony away from France for two reasons. First, the colony was very, very prosperous in spite of the war. And second, that prosperity was used by the French Revolution to combat them in Europe.
Spain controlled Saint-Domingue's neighboring colony. So in June of 1793, Toussaint struck a deal. Spanish garrisons just over the border provided guns and ammunition to the slave army and tipped the balance their way. Toussaint's forces captured 3 cities within 8 months. Saint-Domingue's white planters were desperate. Many hated the new order in France. In a treasonous move, they invited the British to help put down the slave rebellion. Now, the empires of France, Spain, and England, along with a vast army of former slaves, were fighting for control of the small island colony. Then, in early 1794, events in Paris caused another explosion in the colony. A multiracial delegation from Saint-Domingue had appeared in France's National Assembly. They had been sent by Commissioner Sontonax with a dramatic message. He had pledged freedom to Saint-Domingue slaves for fighting the armies of Britain and Spain. The emissaries made a compelling argument.
These are the principles and the ideals of France, and we fully represent them, and we wish to continue to represent them on our island. And so we've come to present our arguments about why we are, in fact, truly committed to those ideas and principles, and how we epitomize these principles of the French Revolution.
I think it was very powerful for the representatives of France to hear, essentially, that what had happened in the Caribbean is that the white slave owners had deserted France. They had gone over to the British, they had fought against the Republic, and the true people, the true Republicans in Saint-Domingue were these enslaved people who just wanted their freedom.
The French National Assembly endorsed the emancipation of Saint-Dominguean slaves. But that was not all. The delegates freed slaves throughout the entire empire, too.
And there's rejoicing and celebration. There's an older woman, a free woman of color, who's traditionally gone to the debates, who sort of sheds tears and is brought down and celebrated as part of this moment. And there are speeches in Paris, celebrations of this event throughout France. It's really seen as a kind of triumph for the French Revolution, for the ideals of the French Revolution, that this worst form of hierarchy, enslavement, and oppression has been abolished in the Caribbean.
It was utterly unprecedented. In a stroke, nearly 1 million black slaves had become French citizens. Word that the French revolutionary government had freed its slaves reached Saint-Domingue quickly. It was one of history's great watersheds, and due largely to the extraordinary military accomplishments of Toussaint's army. But the credit did not rest with Toussaint alone. He had several able commanders working under him, men like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who shared his soldiers' life experiences more closely than Toussaint.
Dessalines had been mistreated in slavery, considerably whipped a lot. He had tremendous whip scars on his back that he liked to display on occasion. He had deep reserves of anger and violence, but also a very intelligent man.
For Dessalines and Toussaint, emancipation changed everything. They quickly trimmed their sails to the new order.
Toussaint realized that Spain had a king, England had a king, and France was talking about liberty, equality, fraternity. All men equal. So he realized that although the revolt started by fighting the French right now could be the best help they could receive. So he rejoined the French.
After 3 years in opposition, Toussaint Louverture was once again a loyal French citizen. So were his followers. It tipped the balance. Before long, Toussaint, Dessalines, and the army of ex-slaves pushed the Spanish out of Saint-Domingue. The British soon followed. Word of Toussaint's astonishing string of victories against white armies was spreading across the European world.
They didn't like it. They didn't like it at all that there was a black general beating white armies. They didn't like it.
Slaveholders everywhere were stunned and worried.
In the United States, for instance, and in Cuba, they didn't want even white Frenchmen to come because they would tell the story. Why are you running away from Saint-Domingue? They would answer that. And no matter what they answer, it would be known that there was a black revolt.
We confronted dangers in order to gain our liberty, and we will be able to confront death in order to keep it. Slaves had once accepted their chain because they had not experienced a state happier than slavery. But those days are over. The people of Saint-Domingue would rather be buried in the ruin of their country than suffer the return of slavery.
Toussaint's ringing language showed his profound attachment to democratic ideals, but there was another side to Toussaint too.
Anybody who looked like they threatened Toussaint either ended up dead or deported.
Toussaint had already been appointed Brigadier General and then Governor of Saint-Domingue. No black man had ever risen so far in the colonies. But Toussaint had a rival. The beloved French civil commissioner, Félicité Sonthonax.
Sonthonax was extremely popular because he was the one to say, okay, slavery is abolished. He was very popular.